Numerology podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numerology podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. Mimi Young is here again. In 2020, she was here and we talked about intuition and tea and plant medicine and working with ancestors. Today, we're talking about animism and numerology and her relationship to the word witch and what we might have in store as we move through the belly, the middle part, and then into the second half of Yang Water Tiger year. And then we'll move into a Yin Water Rabbit year in early 2023. Mimi Young is a Taiwanese-Canadian animist, spirit medium, and the founder of Ceremony, which is an esoteric brand focused on imparting practical, ancient wisdom so folks can actively receive support from spirits and break negative patterns and celebrate their path. Mimi works at the intersection of animism and Wu shamanism, ancestral wisdom, dream work, and other Chinese mystic practices to communicate with the unseen. She offers private readings, education and mentorship, and made-to-order skin and aura care. You'll want to check out the show notes afterwards at numerologypodcast.com so you can see all those courses and things that Mimi mentions in this episode. This episode is packed with wisdom and just good information for all of us. So the first time, you may just want to listen, and maybe you want to listen more than once. So the first time, just let it wash over you, let it permeate you, and then maybe the second time, take notes. But for now, enjoy the show. So Mimi, it's been a minute since you were on the show. We should probably update your answer to this question. So what identities do you lead with?
Oh my goodness. I love how you asked that because it's been a while that I've really thought about that. I would say lately I've been using the term animist, spirit medium, and occultist, but additional identities that I feel that are also very important in my work. I mean, it may not show up in that way, but it's the identity of mother. Mm-hmm. It's the identity of future crone, like baby crone, even. And these are, I'm looking at these timelines a little differently than, let's say, the way I did even like 2 years ago. Yeah.
When you say baby crone, okay, well, let's set the stage here. So how old are you? And we talked about the crone last time, but what's making you feel like you're moving there?
Okay, so I'm 43 and I'm starting to experience some perimenopausal changes. And understanding that whole process can take, in excess of 10 years. I don't exactly know when that last egg is going to trickle out. But knowing that I am in this transition point between the mother or matron archetype, stepping into crone archetype, and just becoming familiar with that, and learning about what that means.
What about the term witch? Is that a term that resonates for you, or is there something else that kind of better fits your spirituality?
Yeah, witch is such a loaded word, especially in English. I feel it's a bit different, let's say, in Mandarin, where it literally means occultist crone. That's really what, we were to translate the word upo, that's what it means. Or even shamanic occultist crone, to be really specific. I think in English, would it be okay before I even answered that question that I defined a few terms?
For sure.
I feel it kind of helps us understand what witch means for me.
Sure.
So let's start off with the term spirituality. I would define spirituality as inner transformation and outer change. It's the two. I also want to define the word magic. Of course, a lot of times that term shows up for witch.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that magic is the exploration of likely and unlikely connections, the awakening as well as the mobilization of these connections,
Mm.
and uniting them with the seen and unseen energies towards renewal, towards regeneration, towards change.
I really enjoy how you're sort of making explicit the spectrum or connection between these polarity energies. Thank you. Yeah.
And then the last, I guess, term to define, which associated with which is coven. What
Mm.
exactly is a coven? For me, it's a communal space for the consideration and cultivation of education, transformative experiences, and co applied united magic for the purpose of
Co-applied,
change.
co-applied united magic for the purpose of change. That's a beautiful definition.
Thank you. Thank you. So in that context, I feel that witch for me is someone who stands in these overlapping spaces of
Mm.
spirituality, magic, coven. And yeah, that would make me a witch.
Mm. Oh, that's exciting. Now, you said that in Mandarin, you added shamanic as well. And so, can you describe what was the word pua for which?
Upo,
Upua.
upo, yeah,
Upua. How,
upo,
how,
yeah,
yeah. Can you flesh that out a little bit? Why shamanic and what does define
right.
shamanic then?
Yeah, I know. And this is actually, it's not even the perfect translation. So let's start off with the two characters in Mandarin. So there's
Mhm.
u and there's po. Po is a little easier to define. So we'll start there. So po is crone. Um, and sometimes, depending on how it's used, if it's combined with another character, it could even mean, for instance, like the grandmother. It doesn't have to be like biological grandmother, but yeah. Okay, so just you kind of
Gotcha.
have an idea of what the po means. Um, U is it's it's shamanic, it's animistic, it's occultic, it's magician. It's all these terms because in ancient Taoist culture, there was no separate distinctions, and that
Mhm.
one word um, very concisely summarizes it all.
Mm,
In
mm,
English, it's I feel like there's these like they're seen as separate disciplines almost,
mhm,
whereas ooh, it really is all of that,
mhm,
and one sees it as these like multiple hyphens, but it's the same thing.
mhm,
It's under one thing, and
mhm.
it's this crone that embodies it, and she's the
Nice.
witch.
Yeah. And then what about animism? How do you define that?
I love how you asked that. I have a few different definitions.
Okay.
So I would say like in that more like intellectualized definition or like a little bit more like formal language, I would say the cosmos is alive and intelligent and comprised of many different sentient beings or degrees of sentience, and humans are one of the being types within it. So in other words, the universe does not exist for humanity's exclusive pleasure,
Mm,
exclusive convenience, exclusive opinions, or
mm,
exclusive survival.
mm,
So, to simplify it, animism to me is about decentering the human perspective. And to really simplify that, what I sometimes say to my boys is animism is realizing that it's not all about us.
mhm. That's a great way of putting it. I fully agree. I fully agree. So at Witches New Year, October 15, 16, that's the weekend, and you're going to be on leading a session on the 16th on Sunday. You are going to lead a session about animism and numerology. So can you give us an overview? Like those seem like disparate topics. How did they come together?
So, if you look at the world through that realization that it's not all about us and that everything is alive, then numbers also hold a lot of meaning. And it's not just simply something that is practical or as a way to convey measurement or to document, which are all very, very important. I'm not saying that those things are not sacred, but there's also more to it than that. I feel that with numbers, there's a lot of mythology and storytelling that can be told, especially through the Taoist lens, and how if one can relate with numbers as friends, as teachers, as allies, um, then they can play a very active role in our esoteric work. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm really excited to share about, and to help folks see that, numbers contain a lot of power, um, and a lot of lessons.
Can I ask you a question about
Yeah,
intersectionality with this?
yeah.
So you're talking about a Taoist lens. And so how do you carry, hold, frame this when you are teaching white people like me? Like,
Mm.
is it appropriative to be like, oh, I'm going to do like a Taoist numerology on my whatever, like how can we carry this in a good and like reverent way that feels more like appreciation than appropriation?
Um, I would say that by me sharing the essence of my own culture and upbringing, and uh, how animism, how Taoist, uh, how all these perspectives show up in the day to day, I'm inviting folks to see it beyond just the lens of Taoist spirituality or a Taoist belief. They see it a lot more integrated. And so, a lot of time in my work, I have a really hard time even naming some of my offerings. Like, I have a
Mm,
hard time. I might have a name for it, let's say, like Mystery Mentorship, which is like a 5-part long form series. And then, like, okay, fine, there's a name, but then there's like the subtitle. And it's the subtitle that I find very difficult because I notice that I become really wordy. And
mm,
it's because English oftentimes lacks the words to
mm,
succinctly convey these things. But really, what it is when people walk with me, especially more through the long term, they start seeing that I'll reference things and how it shows up again, how this shows up again. And they realize that it's so woven into every aspect of life that they cannot help but be in reverence.
mm,
And when they are in that state of reverence, they very, very much start uh, challenging their own perspectives that they grew up with, whether if it's like through the school system or through like just, mainstream society or familial upbringing or whatever. Um, and whether you want to call it decolonizing or deconstruction, there is a breakdown that occurs.
mm,
And that breakdown, I feel, is really the point of my work, period.
mm,
And I wound up, my website wound up, I had to sort of like ask myself, like, what is it do I do? And I wound up coming up with these words: ways of knowing and ways of unknowing with the unseen.
mm,
Because I feel like so many people are drawn to the knowing. It's like, I want to be more intuitive, or I want to be able to, hear my guides, or I want to be able to make positive change through magic. That's a lot of times under the umbrella of knowing.
mhm,
And in Taoist, that would be called the foreground or the
mm,
positive space, very yang.
mhm,
But then there's also the unknowing. The unknowing is like the negative space, the background, the yin. And
mm,
that is just as important
mm,
um, in magic work or witchcraft or whatever you want to call it as everything else.
mm,
I say that I've said this a few times in art school. I have an undergrad in design, and so in art school, one of my instructors had said, in the West, we are told that perfection or completion is there's nothing left to add.
mm,
And then he pauses and he's like very humbled by this. And then what I've really realized is that in the East, this ancient sort of older part of the world says completion or perfection is there's nothing left to take away.
Mm.
And to me, that's very, very Taoist. It's like this reverence of the unknowing, of the unseen, the yin, the background, the negative space. And to me, I feel when that is integrated in work, it really does help provide at least some provisions to mitigate against appropriation. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer.
No, it's a beautiful answer, and of course, it's got to have nuance and background and context. So, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. Okay, so can we kind of get down to brass tacks because we're getting into this, like, this autumnal season, and well, first I want to ask you, like, how do you feel about fall?
I love fall. I don't know why I love fall. I feel that it's a season where I very naturally begin engaging in much deeper listening.
Mm-hmm.
The earth around us is transforming, and it prompts me to just tune into that. Yeah, it's also a time where, I used to ask myself, is it because September symbolizes a new year for school age children? Or even to a certain degree, folks in post-secondary. September is this like big pivotal month. So it feels like a new year, but then it's also, of course, we're entering into a new year for many ancient traditions.
For sure. In my lineage, the Scottish tradition, what today we would call New Year's Eve is what we would also call Halloween. So it's like that's the beginning of the year. So my friend Dee said it really well. She said, yeah, you can, like, the days are shorter. You can feel the day dying earlier and you can feel the year dying. And I was like, ooh, it's so poignant. It's so true. You can just feel the culmination and endings of things. But for me, I also feel the possibility of and the germination that happens in the dark time. So I'm very excited about it. Can you speak a little bit about some of the themes you see in the weeks ahead as we close out 2022? From a numerological perspective, the animism of numerology and these concepts of like change, which I've read either on a post or a newsletter that you said like that concept is really up in September, October, and then the same but new, which is a theme that's alive until January. What are you seeing?
Yeah. So change that, which is really the energy that for the folks who are tuning in to this podcast when it airs, it's really about September and October. And it's not to say that there won't be change later on, but you're going to feel it most amplified during this time. And it's very much not only because the season is changing and it's like you said, things are germinating, the days are shorter, nights are longer, but it's because of this particular year that we are in, which is the water tiger year. The water tiger year, if you were to compare, and I talk about this in my Chinese Astrology 2-part e-course, if you were to look at the year as the shape of an animal, and so the start of the lunar year as the head of the animal, and the end of the lunar year as the hind of the animal. So whether if it's like their tail or their hind legs or even their bottom, like it really depends on the animal. Because we are now a little bit halfway through that midpoint, we are essentially in the tiger's belly.
Ooh.
And bowels.
Okay.
These are changing parts of the body.
We're digesting,
right?
chanting,
Yeah.
we're like,
We're digesting, we're releasing. There's a lot of this kind of stuff that we energetically are experiencing because the tiger is the custodian of this year. It's not always this case every year. Some people may feel massive change in a different month, depending on the whatever animal that is the custodian of that particular year. But for the tiger year, it is it. And so it's belly, bowels. There's going to be change. There's going to be change. And then once it releases through, it's the tail that kind of helps balance again. So the tail is then helping us navigate some of the results of that change. And so some of that will be the same. And yet everything that is the same will also feel new because we've passed through the nutrients, we've passed through the waste, we've passed through a lot of energy that Tiger had taken on earlier this year, which is very fast, very accelerated, very conflict driven, very FOMO, very aggressive energy. And it's starting to sort of like settle down. There's this expression in Mandarin where a tiger year, like it starts with a bang, ends with a whimper, very much like a wild cat. And that is really what the same but new means, is like we're coming back, but we're different now. We've learned, we've changed. And yet the same people are most likely in our lives. We're probably in the same sort of dynamics in, perhaps in work. Even if we changed work, the dynamics still remain very much the same, but we are new. We are made anew.
Wow. I so relate to that. That's been my year, like 1,000%. And when I was first reading about the water tiger year, I could tell. I was like, oh yeah, this is like, I'm coming in kind of tidal wave. And then I'm like everywhere, kind of surround sound effect, but it's going to settle. And, but the essence is still there, right? Like you said, the nutrient, like the best or the essence or the nutritious, the nourishing parts that were there before that have like gone through that process of release. I can sense them still, like I'm holding on to them tighter. And when I think of the tail, especially with felines, they're such an indicator of mood, emotion, like that kind of thing.
Yes.
They can indicate like irritation, like swat things away. They can also be in that alert repose, but there's so much information about the emotional state of, and like how balanced that is. And also sending signals of like, okay, world, if you're paying attention, this is the real me. And I'm really inspired by that. That also helps me kind of locate myself. How many more months do we have of tiger year then? Because is it the spring equinoxes or when is
it's actually a little earlier this upcoming
February?
Lunar New Year. It is January 22nd.
Oh, January. Okay.
Yeah, Sunday. So it's quite early compared to previous years.
Okay.
And that's really where that same but new it's going to stretch all the way until then.
Okay.
And then there will be a bit of an overlap. We'll start feeling some of the following year's custodian, which is the Yin Water Rabbit. We'll start feeling it a little bit. If you're really, really in tune and sensitive, you might even feel it as early as a winter solstice. But most of us are probably going to start feeling just some notes, some little whiskers, so to speak, of the rabbit in January. Yeah, I know.
Okay, that's so great. Oh, I love it. Okay, so what is water rabbit like? I just want to say I'm already feeling like tingles because we just in the Numinous Network, we just did intuitive planning for the year ahead. And when I like did my 12 cards, I was like, oh, I'm glad I like made hay in these last 2 years because this is a much more, there was a lot of high contrast with black and whites. The colors were all blues and greens. The figures were all quite solitary. And I was like, and there was a lot of kind of water and air. And I was like, okay, so I guess it's the year of being a writer. Like I was like, what's happening here? I'm not quite sure. But it did feel like there was a restrained energy or just like it's pretty contrasting with my yang water tiger energy that I've had. So what is water rabbit like?
Yeah. I'm curious, what deck did you use?
Oh, I blended, we blend all of our decks together.
Oh,
So I
okay.
used my pendulum, and I guess I had about 7 decks that I was using. And
Okay.
it was a blend of Oracle and Tarot.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds so fun, by the way. I love it. And you're right. It's actually that okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of a context, which is a little bit also of that Chinese astrology parts 1 and 2 that I was referring to. I won't go deep into it, but it'll just help provide your listeners a bit more just context.
Yeah. And we can link to all of this in the show notes so people
Okay.
could take the course. Yeah.
Okay. So there's 12, 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac. They go through a cycle each through the 5 elements. And in Taoist work, there's 5 elements, not 4. And so they each get a chance to go through this. So the wheel, so to speak, is 60,
Mm.
60 cycles.
Okay.
It takes 60 years. And the cosmos likes balance, likes to create some form of adjustment when things change. It's like, energy is never lost. It's just transformed. So if there is a yang water year, it means the following year, there's going to be a yin water year. That's just sort of how it works. And that's how the order of the animals are arranged. They're yang, and then there's a yin, and there's a yang, and there's a yin. And a lot of times what happens is whatever the yang does in the preceding year, the yin will do its best to balance out, or sometimes I say to clean up the mess that the
Okay.
yang did.
Okay.
So
I feel
we
called
know,
out. Okay.
yeah. And it's not always cleaning up, I should say, but I do find a lot of times it is.
Okay.
And I say this because we're a very young culture here in actually really much of the world now, because it's so industrialized, but especially in the West. We're so hyper young. The yin years are functioning as cleanup or as reparation. And so we know, at least so far, what's happened in this particular tiger year. Rabbit years are years of refinement and restraint. So it's interesting that you talked about restraint. It's about returning to good manners. It's about diplomacy. It's about slowing down. It's about graciousness. It's about persuasion, not force. It doesn't mean that folks who have strong wills will no longer have strong wills. But it means that very likely you will feel the need and you will benefit from pausing, observing, and then responding. Not with the same kind of urgency or reactive nature that the tiger typically would impart on the collective. It's a year where most water or most rabbits in general they don't like to make waves. So they might have an opinion, but they may not say it in the most obvious way. And you'll see, depending on the kind of year and also the kind of year it was before, how rabbit wants to show up. I found that with rabbit years, it's a year where, and this is good and bad, take it or leave it, where because there's a return to diplomacy, where sometimes people don't really want to hear or talk about those unpleasant things. Because folks are tired and folks are a bit frazzled by the tiger year. They want to regulate again. And so it may be one of those years where things are inventoried but not necessarily addressed. Or if it is addressed, it's addressed in a way where it's a bit more thorough and where it's more about finding where can we land on commonality rather than saying what is wrong.
Oh, that sounds nice. That sounds
Yes,
really nice.
yeah. And yet, it can also, the sides perhaps that are a little bit less desirable at times would be, it may be a year of procrastination or complacency because of that 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 reservation towards
Okay.
wanting to make waves.
Okay. Okay.
So it's not necessarily good or bad, rabbit. But you say nice because probably because you've experienced such an activity filled tiger year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I do want to go slower. I do want to take my time to make decisions. I do
Mm-hmm.
want to, yeah,
Yeah. I
um,
want less tasking.
less tasking.
I
Yeah,
want less sort of like scoping out, sensing I want less outward kind of stuff. I want to go into my burrow a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
You won't be entirely though, Carmen. I'll do a quick little like reading for you right now. Is like next year, like the next lunar year is really when your discussion around regulation is going to be in high demand because that's what
Mm,
folks are really looking for.
mhm.
People don't know how to rest and people
Right.
don't know how to engage in leisure.
Mm,
And it's folks like you and for any folk like anyone who wants to hold space, that will be a theme.
That makes sense. We can all learn together. I'm a person who, like, I'm actually very comfortable with having waves of activity and then waves of non activity. I actually am comfortable with that, but it takes me, like many people like me, a little while to kind of shift the set point of my activity metabolism. It takes it a little while to like come down,
Right.
But
Yeah.
then once I'm down, I'm like, oh, yeah, I could just be in the garden. I could be with my pumpkin. I could be with my dahlias. I could be with I just
Pumpkin.
every day, my pumpkin. I
I
love
know. Oh, I
pumpkin.
love your pumpkin so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. I could be with roses. I could be with my seedlings. I could be with my wheat weaving. Like I really can just be in and just for me,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
for me. It doesn't, though it's funny. That saying of like, oh, if it's not on Instagram or TikTok or something, did it even happen? It's
Right.
kind of like, listen, I am my biggest TikTok fan. I watch my TikToks. I watch it so I can enjoy, like I can't wait to be like, oh, I'm putting up garlands. I'm getting video of me for like Yuletide so that I can watch and be like, look at that pretty garland. Like to me, that's creativity and fun. And I don't need my stuff to be seen by others necessarily, but it is really beautiful to share in it. But I would like to do more like, okay, and now our wave is settling. And now we're all just gonna, like here's us doing, well, like, I'll be doing stuff like candlelight therapeutic tremoring, that kind of stuff,
Oh
just
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of stuff just sounds super appealing to me. So
Totally.
thank you for
Totally.
that
No,
insight.
I totally love what you just said about the candlelight tremor.
Mm,
Yeah, rabbits are very attracted to beauty and pleasure.
mm,
Um, and so that will be part of it is how beauty can support rest.
mm.
Yeah, how how beauty and leisure are linked.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
and I love how you say that you create your TikToks for yourself because it's so funny. It's actually a shame that the world would kind of define that as like maybe narcissism, but
Totally
to me
vain, totally
that
vain.
that to me is returning to the inner child is like the pure pleasure of doing and of being. It's like, when was the last time you ran for the pure exhilaration of that feeling of running? Like
Totally.
you don't
Yeah.
do that anymore. And
Yeah.
to create for the pleasure of creation to and then to watch it after. I
Yeah.
think that's really, really beautiful and very rejuvenating.
I find it so. I find my mirror neurons start firing. I get happy again. Like it really
Yeah.
is. I'm reliving that moment. And yeah, absolutely. I can see how it's narcissistic, but I think that it
No,
tips
no, no,
into
no, but someone on
narcissistic.
the outside, I'm
Right,
saying,
right.
yeah.
But I can see how, like, of course I understand how social media can converge with our biggest insecurities and make us,
Mm,
really care about how many people are watching, how many people are following, how many people liked, all that stuff. But that's just not what I'm doing. I
yeah.
literally am just like, I want to relive that moment because that was so good. Can we talk about your creative self for a
Yes,
moment?
of
Okay.
course.
First, when or where do you feel most creative?
It's funny because I feel that when I'm inspired, it's like I can't plan it.
Mhm.
Like for me, it's not this like 10-step thing where you do this and then boom, it happens. A lot of times it just happens when I'm not expecting it. Yeah. So for me, I've realized that because it's happening when I don't expect it, and it's happening at very different times when I'm engaged in different types of activity, I have a lot of pleasure in having many hyphens. What I mean by that? Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
multi-hyphenate. There's like this
yeah, like
and
it's
that.
like, yeah, it's very much this and that. And so sometimes I feel most creative when I'm baking or cooking. And I feel especially creative when I can be inventive with what is just in the fridge, or in my pantry, and not necessarily having to rely on a recipe, or certainly reading the recipe, breaking about half the rules.
Totally. Yeah. Yep, that's what I do
Uh,
too.
yeah, and that's actually, I'm really excited about your book, because it's like I can't wait to be inspired, and then also to do my own thing, right? And
Totally.
add more hyphens to it.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, it's also like, I also find a lot of creativity when I look at something and look at the brilliance, and then also can think of how it could even be tweaked.
Mhm.
So for instance, I sometimes will edit copy for folks to really help them crystallize what exactly they want to say. And then at
Mhm.
the same time, spot the bias in their language and
Mm.
make it a really great point to engage in conversation around
Mm.
how bias shows up, in a
Mhm.
very, very subtle way. And then it becomes healing, for everyone involved.
Mm.
And very just, yeah. So I would say for me, when I feel clear in my
Mm.
head and clear in my heart, that's when I'm engaging in creativity.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's like, I mean, really, was it the chicken or the egg? Like, I don't know. Like, is it because I'm being creative that helps me return to a clear heart? Or is it because I have a clear heart, I can engage in something creative? I don't know.
Mm. Mhm.
But those things are very important in that process.
Mhm. It feels even relieving to hear you describe being creative in copywriting and editing and helping other people reveal bias. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, would you do that? Like, that just feels so great. Like, I that sense of like a veil or a blanket or a heaviness coming off so you can see your bias is like such a gift. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
thank you for doing that, but also revealing like, oh yeah, what a beautiful form of healing that is. I can feel it even as you're describing it, and that kind of upwards, outwards, sideways, very like what I would call like ventral vagal, like we're pronking here because
Mm.
it's like, oh my gosh, this has been revealed to me, and now I can move forward with more enthusiasm, more freedom,
Yeah.
just more confidence. I can see how that in itself offers an opportunity of creativity to other people as well. It's like very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, and I love how you use the word freedom, because it's liberating our language,
Hmm.
right? It's like noticing how our language is loaded with energies that have been historically inherited.
Mm.
Because a lot of these things are old. It came out in a time where that was the norm and it was accepted and unexamined. And now we're in a time where people are wanting to disrupt that norm, but because we use the words that we use all the time, and it's not necessarily even harmful. I'm going to share with you the funniest little story about my conversation with my son.
Okay.
So my son, he's 7. My baby, I've 2 kids, and yeah, my younger one, he's 7, and I think you would really like him, and I can't wait for him to read your book, because he loves being in the kitchen. That's his like
Oh, great.
favorite thing. So he's been making his own chocolate bars
Oh,
and his own mocktails.
oh.
So he'll come into, and the kitchen's usually very sticky as a result of it, because he's playing with syrups and such.
Yeah.
So, he'll make his little concoction, and then he'll actually make his own paper umbrellas as like the little garnish.
Yeah.
And his paper umbrellas are not functional. He'll literally just draw with pencil crayon a flat two-dimensional umbrella, then cut it out of paper, then tape it to a toothpick, and then just sort of like have it hang out there. But anyway, so I said to him, I was like, hey, Keo, at the end of the day, I think you might be a recipe tester or a recipe creator. And he looks at me and he's like, at the end of the day, no. It'll be the start of the day, because at the end of the day, I'm going to bed. And I was like, whoa, that was a lesson for me. My language does not make sense to him. And that's just an example. It's like, it's clarity, right? That clarity of heart, clarity of mind.
Oh, I love and how he was like, no, I am aligning this with the energy of I'm not waiting.
I'm not waiting. It's like, I'm going to bed. Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you do any rituals around creativity, like to maybe either get into or harness creative flow?
I would say that because I consider all my work technically generative and creative and regenerative in a way, I start my day. This is after my kids are off to school. I start my day with tea. I share tea with the energies in my home. So I have a few altars, and I tend to my altars. I don't know how to start my day without doing those two things first. Um, but then there's also other points, because sometimes you talked about this. It's like this like shifting of gears. So it's not like that's like the one thing I do, because sometimes if I'm shifting tasks, I need to kind of move a little bit and do something else before I can start that new task. And that might be when I'm like watering the garden, or when I engage in like, a very, very intentional 10-minute space of total silence, silence within myself. Of course I can't control the sounds around me. Or even just like tend to my home in a very conscious, aware way, where it's like, hi home, how are you doing? And I say this because I sort of, going back to the crone, our homes are our wombs. Like, we live in this space, a lot of birthing takes place, literal birthing maybe, and then even figurative birthing comes out of the home. So our home is very like vaginal and very womb-ish. And so sometimes I'll have to just ask, like, am I caring for you? Am I taking care of you properly? Do you need something? Do you need anything? And I feel like that's part of it, because if I don't do that, then I feel like I'm not honoring the space where I am creative.
That's such a beautiful and poetic, lyrical way of putting that. It's funny because as you started talking about shifting energies, what popped into my head is I do a 10-minute tidy up. Because my place might just be like total chaos, which it often is, because I'm like, it's really hard for me to like end one task and go to the next. I'm like, oh, but I'm still working on that or whatever. But I need one space where I just go, like I start on the left and I move to the right, and I'm like a whirling dervish for 10 minutes and just clear it, whether it's my desktop or my kitchen counter or the living room or the foyer. It's like I need one space where I just go and just shift the energy there. And it's cleaning up my home. It's tending to my home. Like I need like 10 minutes of just really tending. I'm not doing it as like womb-like as you are in that kind of way. But now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll be a little gentler about that. Maybe I'll like light my candle first, or like put some aromatherapy on, so that as I'm whirling around, it's at least more fun.
I love how you talked about cleanup. I talked about this in my Magic of Tea series. My Magic of Tea series, it's a hybrid series where there's folks that are tuning in via live stream, and there's also folks who come to this tea house in Vancouver called O5, and it's very, very intimate. It's a maximum of 10 live stream and 10 folks in person. And our last one was about befriending change. And I want to talk about this a little bit, which I think would help you understand why you clean.
Okay.
So I also talked about this, I should say, on my Substack, but I didn't actually explain why. And it was meant to be a teaser on the Substack. So folks who want to come to my befriending change magic tea event. But anyway, why is cleaning so connected to creative flow? It's because, remember how I talked about that negative space, which is the yin?
Mm-hmm.
When we move the foreground, we're also changing the background. We're changing the negative space, which means that we're activating that yin energy so that we can be receptive, which is what we need to be in when we are creative.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I got chills all the way down the back of my body. Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm activating something in the unseen that could come in and be received, and there's space for it.
Yes.
Oh, that's exciting. That makes 10-minute tidy up seem like sometimes I feel a little neurotic. So I really appreciate you making that much more romantic. Yeah. Okay. So the last question on the podcast is different since you're a return guest. So this time, the last question is, where are you finding joy and pleasure these days?
For me, this particular time of the season, I would say I find so much joy in the kitchen. It's this desire to eat cooked foods, warm foods, soup, stews, broths, and then also, of course, sharing it with my family, and even sharing it with just random people that may pop into my day, because I usually have a big, very big pot that is not quite enough that we can all consume or freeze. And then the other bit is stories. I think it's associated with getting cozy for me. So it's like this importance of sharing stories, hearing stories, telling stories, creating stories. It gives me a lot of pleasure.
Oh, wow. I just want to snuggle on in. I feel excited. And I'm like, oh, yeah, corn chowder. I got stuff I got to make in the next while. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm super excited to do the Animism of Numerology with you, which is New Year. And I really appreciate all the wisdom that you shared today. And I'm sure that people will find a lot of richness and goodness when they go to your website. In the show notes, we'll have all of the links there. But thanks for everything you shared today, Mimi.
Thank you, Carmen.
Okay, if you weren't excited for Witches New Year on October 15, 16 before, you are now, right? This has been such a fantastic preview. I cannot wait for Mimi's session on Sunday. Check out the show notes at numinouspodcast.com for the links to Mimi's courses mentioned in this episode. There's Chinese Astrology 1 and 2, and also the Mystery Mentorship, a way into the hidden through animism and the esoteric arts. So alluring. Join us the weekend of October 15th and 16th, 2022 for the Witches New Year, and hear Mimi talk about the animism of numerology for 2022. Listener shout out today. I want to say hello to someone in particular very dear to me. I want to say hello to Lynn, who is in Taiwan right now. I love you. I miss you. I'm worried about you, but I also believe in you. And I hope you're having a great time starting your gap year abroad, kiddo. Finally, remember that The Spirited Kitchen is available for pre-order online or from your local independent bookseller. Just ask them to bring it in. And then bring your receipt back to my website to receive your instant bonus downloads. Just go to the cookbook tab at carmenspaniola.com. Now, you might also be thinking, I don't really need to amplify for Carmen. I don't need to tell people or post about it or put it in my own blog or newsletter or my own podcast because Carmen's doing fine. She's got a great platform. She has a well-known podcast. Let me disabuse you of this notion, my friend. Every single voice matters when it comes to lifting up titles like this. And even if you don't think your people identify as witches, even if you think, I just have a small private Instagram account, it's not going to go anywhere. Think of it as like dosing the field, the morphogenetic field. We're helping to normalize that these kinds of anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-white supremacist spiritual books are wanted and needed. So every time you post on your own timeline or on Facebook or write about it in your blog, it's like a radicalized angel gets its wings. And if you want to be part of the Cookbook Coven, which was a name chosen already before Mimi's Coven. Anyway, if you want to join me in my efforts to bring the Spirited Kitchen out into the world, and you want some bonuses, there's a bunch of bonuses. You should be on my newsletter. Get on my newsletter at carmenspaniola.com, and the Cookbook Coven is going to be announced very soon. And one of the bonuses I'm so excited about, you're going to get a little book of my Christmas cookies, my 9 recipes for my Christmas cookies. You'll get like a little booklet with all the recipes, why I love them, how awesome they are, the ones I've been making for like over a decade. And you'll get all of that just for posting and providing an honest review of the Spirited Kitchen once you get it in your hot little hands after October 31st. So get on my newsletter to be part of the Cookbook Coven and help amplify and let people know about it. You just go to my website at carmenspaniola.com, CarmenSpagnola. Sign up for the newsletter and you'll hear all about it. Till next time, take care.